Well, our next speaker is Oliver Zajac from the German Historical Institute. He is going to speak to us about Czartoryski, Galicia, and plans for future Polish uprising. Oliver, take it away.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, first of all, dear Dasha and Alexander, thank you very much for organizing this event. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to meet, even though only through the screen of the computer, with colleagues interested more or less in the same subject as I'm. Just for the clarity and to be fair to both the institutions which support me, I am currently a postdoctoral scholar at the German Historical Institute in Warsaw, but I am also affiliated with the Institute of History of Slovak Academy of Sciences in Bratislava. So today I have prepared a presentation titled "Austrian Bureaucrats and Polish Nationalists as Revolutionary Allies" with a quotation mark, Czartoryski, Galicia, and plans for future Polish uprising. As it follows from the title of my presentation, my research has not been actually focused on the Austrian bureaucracy as an active protagonist of the story, but rather on its reflection by the eminent figure of 19th century European diplomacy, Prince Adam Jerzy Czartoryski, and consequently the aristocratic wing of the great Polish emigration, also known as Hotel Lambert, which Czartoryski led after 1831. Obviously, it is not possible to provide a detailed explanation of various phenomena during the 20 minutes presentation, so I will try to show you the most exciting findings and conclusions, and then we'll look for your questions either during the discussion after the talk or even after the conference. I would be pleased to talk about any inquiries, which after all may help me to prepare a better article for the Planet Edited volume. So I would like to begin with an overview of the research question I have addressed. As anticipated, these particular questions originated from the broadly defined subject of the reflection of the Austrian bureaucracy by Czartoryski and Hotel Lambert. In this context, the term Austrian bureaucracy refers explicitly to the Austrian administration in Galicia, the northeastern territories of the Austrian Empire, which were once an integral part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Furthermore, and even more importantly, these territories were also considered as an integral part of the future and/or desired Polish state, and therefore were highly relevant from the Hotel Lambert's point of view. Czartoryski stated multiple times that Poland, or Polish state, if you want, could be restored as a political entity only in its pre-partitioned borders, therefore in the state from or in 1772.
Oliver, excuse me,
yes?
Just to, you're not sharing the screen, so just to share the presentation again.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was not aware about that. Okay, I believe right now you can see my presentation.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so I will continue. Consequently, the aristocratic wing was not only interested in the Galician state of affairs, but considers it to be one of the priorities of its activities. For that reason, it may be suggested that some concerns about the Austrian administration, Austrian bureaucracy, or even a confrontation with its actions were just a matter of time. You might already read the questions I addressed, since you can see them for a few seconds right now at the presentation. Just for the clarity, I will read them out loud and maybe add some commentaries. The first one was, what was the attitude of Hotel Lambert's representatives towards the Austrian rule in Galicia, particularly towards the Germanization tendencies? In a moment, I will explain what is or what was the meaning of the term Germanization concerning the research subject. Yet right now I will go with the second research question, which was, how did Hotel Lambert representatives intend to interact with the Austrian administration, and what approaches were they planning to apply to contradict the Austrian policy, or on the other hand, to support anti-Germanization tendencies? As is usually the case, several other questions have arisen during the research. Some of them were directly addressed, while the rest may be considered as a potential for future research. I do not intend to talk too long about the characteristic of the Austrian bureaucracy in Galicia. First, I only limited amount of time, and my original research was focused on different problem. Second, some remarkable works have already been published regarding this subject from established authors like Larry Wolf and Irina Wushko, not to mention the numerous Polish and Ukrainian historians. Also, Hugo gave us an amazing presentation just a few seconds ago. So I will not talk too long about this. However, it would be unfortunate to avoid this subject altogether, since the problem of the Austrian administration in Galicia was the actual context to which Czartoryski and Otto Lambert referred in their writings. Therefore, it is necessary to know at least the basics to understand the stance of Polish emigres. The territories of the future Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria, as was this entity later baptized, were ceded to the Habsburg monarchy in 1772 and then second part in 1795, and the consequence of the so-called Polish-Lithuanian, so-called partitions of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The most important thing to mention from my point of view, or from the point of view of my research, is the strategy designed at the court of Marie Therese and her son Joseph II to transform this undeveloped part of the land into the model province of the monarchy built on the origins of the enlightened absolutism. Therefore, along with the real army dislocated at the Galicia, the army of bureaucrats was sent there to enforce the uniform German administration, education, and culture. Historians usually tend to refer to these efforts as the process of Germanization in Galicia. It should be mentioned that it was not about the language hegemony, and actually it was not, after a few years, not even about language hegemony. This term, Germanization, also this term in various other forms like Magyarization, Polonization, etc., is usually referred in general discourse with the language. But this process was quite complex, and its main goal was to promote the integrity of the ruling power and to promote loyalty to the court and monarchy instead of loyalty to the other self-identification attributes. However, it did not last long until the planned process turned out to be turned out in the reverse direction, and instead of promoting the uniform imperial culture, the bureaucrats themselves were facing Polonization. Oh, okay, that's right. There were multiple reasons for this outcome. One of them being the predominance of Catholic faith, which allowed unmarried bureaucrats or their unmarried sons to get married to local women, in contrary to Russian and Prussian partition, for example, or the fact that the Galician social elites were mostly Polish-speaking nobles, and it was therefore a knowledge of Polish language, not German, that opened the door to new social horizons, which forced many bureaucrats to learn Polish after some time in Galicia. Not to mention quite ironic consequence of the imperial censorship, which prohibited both German and Polish authors, but while works of Polish authors were smuggled into Galicia, Germans were not. So at the end of the day, bureaucrats and their families were left with no other choice but to read Polish authors, which in the long horizon obviously affected them. Polish historian Henryk Weresicki suggests that this acculturation of bureaucrats instead of the locals was mainly possible because Austrians have not resorted to the violent, or rather say coercive, Germanization, contrary to the Prussian administrative in the Grand Duchy of Posen. The reason behind this moderate and constructive approach was primarily the closeness of the Russian border, which has been creating constant pressure on the necessity of loyalty, especially the loyalty of local gentry, which possessed historically determined political authority. The detailed analysis of this phenomenon with many particular examples may be found in the publication of Isabel Roskau-Riedel. I will not talk too long on. I will not mention several or many of these examples. Just maybe one which we already heard about him, Governor Lobkowicz, who was well known for his pro-Polish stance, even though, as Hugo correctly pointed out, in my opinion correctly, he was not a fan of some Polish irredentist movement. He was just he believed that it is possible to connect the Polish cultural nationalism with the loyalty to the Vienna court and to the monarch, which after all he was not the only one among the Galician bureaucrats, among the Galician officials. Many of them, for example, financially supported the building of Ossolineum, the well-known Polish cultural institution. However, it might be argued that the Austrian bureaucracy in Galicia failed in its ideological mission. However, even more, the failure was also in its primary goal, and it was to stabilize the province economically and socially, and then help with its progress. At that moment, it must be said that it will be not fair to consider the bureaucrats as the main reason for all the problems which have arisen in Galicia during the 19th century. However, as Piotr Vandic argues, the blaming the Austrian bureaucracy for all Galician problems was the predominant narrative during the 19th century, especially during its first half. So interestingly, Prince Ademir Czartoryski, for example, was a part of this discourse. Even though he lived in the Kingdom of Poland, Czartoryski monitored the situation in Galicia closely. Although before 1831, it was mostly because of the family reasons, since his family owned the manor Sieniawa in Galicia, and also there was a long history of the cordial relationship between Czartoryskis and the Habsburg court. Nonetheless, Czartoryski expressed his thoughts about the Austrian bureaucracy in 1830 when his treatise Essai sur la diplomatie was published. It was published anonymously. The manuscript was actually finished 2 years earlier, but it took some time before it was published in Paris. And the focus of his text lay somewhere else. Yet he provided some thoughts about bureaucracy, which became even more relevant compared with his later memorials from the emigration. Generally speaking, in his text, he denounced the annexation of Galicia and Austrian engagement in northern Italy, as well as the acts of injustice that disrupted the natural order of the international relationships. In his view, to maintain a perpetual peace, which ought to be the ultimate goal of the international policy, it was necessary to build a geopolitical system based on a category of justice, with justice being the acceptance of the autonomous existence of each nation. Obviously, he had quite different thoughts about the Ruthenians, but that's a different story. Concerning Galician bureaucrats, there is one specific paragraph in his text where he clearly stated his critical opinions, and by reading this paragraph, we can see that he was actually quite a part of it. He was on the way which was prevalent in the first half of the 19th century, and he was really critical towards the Austrian bureaucrats in the Galicia. Czartoryski generalized bureaucrats as a social group with the presence of all the negative personal attributes like hatred, distrust, egoism, corruption, etc. Paraphrasing his words, bureaucrats were generally the worst manifestation of the Austrian rule. As he stated, officials sent to the partitioned land were the worst kind of men, people who did not possess any goodwill, and even if there was someone with noble principles, he would be sooner or later suppressed and transformed by the power of the group. They believed that they were sent to rule the country instead of serving it. Noteworthy, in his opinion, this reality not only harmed people from the province, but also had negative consequences on the ruling nation as well. The only ones who benefited from such status were the members of the bureaucracy, who were without a doubt the least moral members of the ruling nation. That's his quotation. Even though Czartoryski presented only a short statement, I believe his opinions could not be expressed more clearly. 2 years later, after the text was published, after the unsuccessful November Uprising, he found himself with Parisian exile in the same fate as thousands of his compatriots. Indeed, his situation was different. As the leader of the Polish government, he consequently became one of the leading figures in emigration, with the ultimate goal to restore the independent Polish state. It was already mentioned that the desired Polish state should have borders from the pre-1772 period, which naturally meant that Galicia was considered to be a part of a future Poland. Otto Lambert's representative worked through the years in immigration with various plans and possibilities, and they modified their stance according to the actual geopolitical situation. However, Galicia never stopped being the proposed base for a future uprising. Maybe just for a short time after the revolution in 1846, but then after 1848, the Galicia as a base for the future uprising. This idea was back in the discourse. For that reason, considerable attention has been paid to the plan to prepare inhabitants of the Galicia, not only for the armed insurrection, but probably even more for the seizure of political power. As was repeatedly stated in many memorials regarding the future uprising, it was more than crucial to quickly establish a stable government with authority over the whole country. To achieve this, as can be read in Czartoryski instructions from 1840, it is suitable, even necessary, to benefit from the presence of unexpected allies, the Austrian bureaucrats. After all, he was aware that the government stability and especially efficiency depended on the local administration. Therefore, according to the plan which he proposed, the bureaucrats would get a chance to choose. If they decided to help with the restoration of Polish state, they would not only keep their offices, but Czartoryski even proposed that they should get a promotion. On the other hand, the ones who refused to cooperate would be removed from their offices as soon as possible, so the communication line of the Austrian administration would become inoperable. The same method would be, according to this plan, applied to the judiciary and also in the Russian part of Poland, or in the Russian partition, or in the Kingdom of Poland, if you want. There was also one interesting point in Otto Lambert's strategy, which I would like to mention: the teaching of the German language. It was already mentioned that many bureaucrats learned Polish and even communicated in this language in their everyday life. However, German became a part of the school curriculum and the administration language, although the Polish strengthened its position even the administration as time passed. The most common reaction of the nationalist movements towards this kind of language policy, the proponents of the policy which force or try to work with a language which is not a mother tongue to inhabitants, has been the promotion of nation language. This is obviously this was not obviously a specificity of Galicia. We can find many different examples from European history, especially from the 19th century. In this case, the Polish language obviously would be the one which should be, or there was a plan to suppress it. Speaking from the Otto Lambert point of view, because there was also Ruthenian, which was a different matter and was not actually relevant from Czartoryski and his collaborators. And obviously, Otto Lambert supported the Polish language to try to maintain its position in Galicia. But even though they published many instructions to promote the language in memorials by publishing and smuggling Polish books, the aristocrats living in Galicia were called to teach their subject Polish language, etc. However, the goal of these activities should not be to suppress the German language, and that was the interesting thing, because from Otto Lambert's point of view, or from Czartoryski point of view, it was desired for Poles to know at least 2 foreign languages, because the fate of Poland had always been closely tied to the fate of Europe. In 1836, in his memorial, he underlined the importance of reading the foreign press. And he, for example, explicitly mentioned several German newspapers like Allgemeine Zeitung. So in this context, it might be, from Otto Lambert's perspective, even stated that the support or the propagation of German or the teaching of German language might actually serve to the benefit of Polish nationalism. At least that is what Czartoryski believed it is possible with knowledge of foreign language. The Polish people would be better prepared to fight for the independent Polish state. The projected uprising, because through the whole presentation I am talking about the uprising which did not happen. It was just the project for uprising, because the one which happened which occurred in 1863, the so-called January uprising, was actually quite different. Especially the situation at the beginning of 60s was quite different. And once again, this fight did not massively spread to the entire territories of the former Commonwealth, and it was not a part of the greater European war, which was one of the conditions for success, which Czartoryski, who by the way passed away in 1861, always emphasized. Consequently, these plans to benefit from Polonized Austrian bureaucrats never came close to realization. I have also not found any evidence that Lambert's representatives or agents tried to establish any interaction with the pro-Polish bureaucrats, and therefore at least hypothetically examine the feasibility of their plans in the case of an uprising. Though it should be noted that Lambert persistently struggled with its position in Galicia, and there were problems with much higher priority, like even finding regular collaborators who would be willing to send reports to Paris, for example. And without stable agency, it was almost impossible to conduct such a demanding and risky mission to negotiate with the bureaucracy, not to forget that it would be a discussion about a high degree hypothetical matter, the matter which did not seem possible anytime soon, especially because Czartoryski was very prudent about the accurate timing of any open actions, and he was unwilling to agree with an armed insurrection until the situation was inclined to Polish success. So to summarize the critical points of my presentation, the Austrian bureaucrats in Galicia mostly failed in their mission, not only in its ideological part, but maybe even more critically in its economic and social aspect. Obviously, as I mentioned, it would be not correct to blame bureaucrats or only blame bureaucrats for the political, economic, and social situation. Yet this has been the main narrative in general discourse, at least until 1848, and that's the reason for which I highlighted this idea about failure so many times. Its particular examples, the particular examples of this discourse, might be found in Czartoryski's Essay sur la diplomatie, providing a highly negative image of an Austrian bureaucrat. However, a radically different narrative prevailed in the emigration, when Czartoryski was no longer just a political theorist, like when he was writing essay, but a political leader trying to achieve something that might even seem impossible: restoration of the independent Polish state. There was no longer only one utterly negative image of the bureaucrats present, but actually two categories: the Polonized bureaucrats willing to cooperate, who should be promoted and shown as an example of virtues, and on the other hand, the ones who stay loyal to the monarchy must be deprived of their function as soon as possible. Though all these ideas remained only at the theoretical level, it should be noted that while Lambert representatives did consider their possibilities towards the Austrian administration, it was more of a side effect of the promotion of Polish nationalism and preparing inhabitants for the armed insurrection, which was Lambert's main agenda concerning Galicia. That will be everything from me. Thank you very much for your attention.